Was it last year, Rowan, we went to a place called Bronkhorstspruit 2 years ago. And I'm glad to see that there's a much bigger audience coming here. You know, we measure our impact on the size of audiences at times. And I'm glad that I don't have to talk to the chairs this morning. Not that there were only chairs in Bronkhorstspruit, but I value the opportunity to share some experiences with you. And just by way of kickoff, I want you to just take a piece of paper, and we're just going to do a small exercise. I want you to take your pen and put it in your right hand, in the normal hand that you write. And I want you to write your name, your first name, as many times as possible whilst I'm timing you, okay? Don't start writing yet. I'm counting 1, 2, 3. Let's go. Stop. Now take that pen and exchange it. Those of you who wrote with your right hands, put it in your left hand, and those of you that wrote with your left hand, put it in your right hand. No debates. I'm timing, starting 1, 2, 3. Starting. Stop. I want you to add the first set of scores, and then the second set of scores, and then we'll talk. Okay, can we get some scores here? First set, between 25 and 30. What's your name?
Jan.
Nato. Between 20 to 25. Quite a few. Between 15 to 20. Now tell me, how did it feel to write for the first time with your left hand instead of your right hand? Awkward? Uncomfortable? Weird?
Unbalanced.
Unbalanced? What else? Difficult?
You felt wrong.
You felt drunk. Any other views? Any other views? Terrible. What else? No rhythm.
Let's try again. Wrong.
Wrong.
Felt like grade 1.
Grade 1. What are we talking about here? I've been asked to speak to you on the subject of diversity in the workplace. Let nobody fool you. Diversity is awkward. Managing diversity in the workplace can sometimes feel uncomfortable. Managing diversity in the workplace can sometimes feel very weird, unbalanced. It throws your whole way of doing things out of the window. You sometimes feel drunk because you try your best and then they hit you back. You're a racist, you're this, you're that, and the other, and you don't know where you're falling in between the rails. It can sometimes feel terrible. I've done everything possible in the book, but things are still not working. It can sometimes feel wrong. Why? Hulle kan mos nie net alles net so op 'n plek op 'n silwer plek te kry nie. Grade 1. Taking those baby steps. And are we getting
I'm still fighting, sorry.
You're still fighting.
The struggle continues.
The struggle continues. Okay, let's just talk then. I want to frame my input here this morning along the theme, mastermind what the master had in mind. Mastermind what the master had in mind. I think you had some background reading in the previous session around how Jesus went about diversity, and I listened to Steve 2 years ago in Bronkhorstspruit, and I can't still forget that, Steve, when you say the way you attract will be the way you retain. That stuck with me for years now. Now, on the 11th of February, we celebrated the day when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. So on that glorious day, on the 11th of February 1990, after spending 27 years in jail for a very just cause, that he was released. And when he ultimately ascended into the highest office in the land, during his inaugural speech, he casted a vision for the country about a rainbow nation at peace with itself and at peace with the world. And yes, we've come a long way, and we've really done excellent things. I mean, we're only 20-odd years old now, and 23 years, it's not much in the life. How old are we now? 23 years. It's still very young in our country's life. And there's a lot of accomplishments that took place during this young life of our nation. There is, however, this uncomfortable piece of work which South African people and organizations have not properly engaged with, and that is the eradication of discrimination in all its forms. You know, we treat these things sometimes like that cousin who is in jail. We know about the cousin, but we don't want to talk about the cousin. Ons praat so rond of haas neef, neef is in die Kaap. Hy gaan aan daar met iets, maar neef is goed. We hardly want to talk about neef. And Song of Solomon puts it so aptly. He says in Song of Solomon 2 verse 15, catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, because our vineyards are in bloom. And our vineyards have been in bloom. Are we winning here? Our vineyards have been in bloom, but we've got to catch these foxes. We've got to deal with them, because if we don't deal with them, they're going to destroy the vineyard. Now, what are these foxes? They represent all the hindrances, the irritations and contradictions that detracts from our ability to bring about a free, equal and united nation focused on creating a prosperous country. Now, given our unfortunate past, this whole notion of race has become a body marker. And it sometimes becomes so deeply ingrained in the psyche of our society. A lot of things are defined through the prism of race. And it also has the effect of dividing us as a society and robbing us of the opportunity to coexist in harmony as equals. I'm of the view that the whole project of the Rainbow Nation has not been fully realized yet. I'm of the view that it has not been followed through with urgency, with persistence and attention to detail. And there are two elements that contributed to this. The first one is apathy, and the second one is political correctness. What do I mean with apathy? It is that lack of feeling, emotion, interest and concern. You see, beloved, just because we can now stay wherever we want, buy property wherever we want, engage in any recreational activity we want, send our schools to whatever school we want and so on, those things are important, but these activities does not mean that we do it out of conviction of a shared identity and authentic acknowledgement of each other's humanity. And unless we engage constructively about these little foxes, these nuances, these prejudices at times, we will not realize real and meaningful progress in our country. The second thing is political correctness. It is a situation where we don't want to disturb the elbow guard. En vir my nie praat nie, want net nou sê hulle weer ek is 'n rasis. En maar net sê nie, want net nou kap hulle my kop af. And you know you want to be politically correct, and some people, when they are called to account, they even use the race card to defend it. Isn't it so? Yeah. This guy is anti-transform, anti-reaction. Account. Tell us what you've done. No, you don't understand. Account. You're a racist. Account. They throw the race card out when they are called to account. Do I make sense, beloved? And one of the most devastating effects of our unfortunate past is the underdevelopment of our human capital. And therefore, me and you have a collective responsibility to make sure that wherever we are, in our various spheres of influence, to make sure that we impart that which God has deposited in our lives and transfer and share it with others. Let's now zoom in to the question of diversity in the workplace. How do we go about co-creating a more inclusive environment to enhance our human capital development? And recently I read an article on the Harvard Business Review around the culture factor. And I like the definition that they threw out around organizational culture. They stated that culture is the tacit social order of an organization. It shapes the attitudes and behaviors in wide-ranging and durable ways. Cultural norms define what is encouraged, what is discouraged, accepted or rejected within a group when properly aligned with personal values, drives and needs. Culture can unleash tremendous amounts of energy toward a shared purpose and foster an organization to thrive. And one of the best ways to have an enduring organizational culture is to give careful attention to diversity. Now, it has been proven by behavioral scientists that diversity is a business imperative. Firstly, diversity brings about higher morale. People feel validated in an inclusive culture. Once you treat everybody with dignity and you validate them for who they are, it can raise the morale. Whether it is the lady that is just making tea for you, by engaging in active interest on her well-being, the tea lady of today might become one of your most trusted workers tomorrow. History is riddled with many examples on how people started at the bottom of the ladder and worked themselves up to the top. Secondly, it also brings different perspectives to the workplace. Because by fostering an inclusive culture, you almost create a melting pot of ideas, and you'll be surprised how some of the best solution comes from the people, not necessarily at the top, and I'll come back to that later. Thirdly, diversity also facilitates global impact. In our day and age, when globalization is becoming the order of the day, most multinationals have realized that it is important for us to have people from diverse cultural backgrounds because they can be very much attuned to what's happening in environments where we didn't have access to in the past. But fourthly, it's also about corporate citizenry. A lot of us are involved in CSI work and so on. But you can only make maximum impact if you understand some of the cultural nuances and the diverse views and opinions from your customer base and those people you intend serving. Now, over the last 20-odd years, diversity in the country took on all manner of shapes and sizes. When we kicked off in 1994, the whole emphasis was on desegregation. Then in the late 90s, the emphasis was on affirmative action. And now, diversity is often been regarded in our day and age as a much more holistic and much more inclusive environment, and it takes on board things like disabilities, gender, youth, religion, sexual orientation, cognitive ability, the urban-rural bias. All those type of things are aimed at a much more inclusive environment. Let me share with you my journey on the transformation arena. And I'll use specifically an example of an organization that was my last executive job that I've had. After that, I'm just now doing, my own things. But I come from a place called Alabama in Clarksville. Born the eldest of 8 children, tough days. I'm trying to capture 62 years of history now in the next 2 minutes. But one of my first serious jobs was to join the nursing profession. I stayed in a colored area. I worked in a predominantly black hospital called Sepong. My children attended an Indian school in Mansell Park because as a civil servant, I wanted them to be taught in an English medium school. I couldn't afford private schools, so Mansell Park was the option. And a lot of my political orientation and a lot of my social orientation was shaped in the black townships because that's where my colleagues live. And to crown it all, I'm married to a Motswana girl for the last 36 years. Talk about diversity. And my eldest daughter, it was a very, 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 very hard task to walk her down the aisle and give her over to an Australian. And then Sundays I go to church, and we will be 5 black families in a predominantly white church at Rhema. I'm talking of the late 80s, 88, 89, somewhere around there. And you get into the church, you've been in the township and you've buried some of your colleagues, relatives, being shot by the riot police, and you come and people prophesy over each other, there no weapon formed against us shall prosper. We the head and not the tail. And you're standing in church, what's happening here? And we used to have a song, this is our land, this is our nation, all sort of things. But this is a different world that I come from. And God had to work in my life as well and prepare me for my future leadership positions. Yes, I went into politics in 1994, and as I entered that space, it was a big culture shock for me as well, because I was a nurse for 17 years, and the next thing, Papa Malife, who used to be the premier of the province, he announced his cabinet and he read the names and came up to number 7 and said, the finance portfolio will go to Martin Kuscus. I didn't know a debit from a credit. And here I'm called upon to manage 6 billion rand. Talk about faith. I needed a lot of it. Through God's grace, I still hold the distinction of being the longest serving MEC of finance in this country with Jabu Maleketi. Heads were rolling all over the place, but by the grace of God, I completed 2 terms there. And I challenge you, go and Google, do whatever you want. Through God's grace, there are no skeletons in the cupboard. Yeah. Now, when your name appears at the golf club as an honorary member, then you know your time is up. And this is what happened to me. So after 2 terms, I decide when I'm going to become a career politician or what. We spent a bit of time here in a place called Shangri-La here in Modimola with my wife for a week. And there was no thunder and lightning and earthquakes, just that inner peace that our time is up and the Lord is leading us into a new area. Cut a long story short, I landed up at the South African Bureau of Standards, and I was the CEO, appointed as CEO in 2004. And on my arrival, just 10 days before my arrival, there was a very, very tragic incident there. One of the guys lost his disciplinary case at the CCMA. During the HR clearance process, he came in with a gun, took the gun out, turned it on his supervisor, shot Jenny Massa, turned the gun on himself. He died first. Jenny, 2 days after that, at used to be called Little Company of Mary Hospital, there opposite the SABS, and the lady died. I was welcomed there by Tandy Olaine, and these people were conducting an inquest and so on, and the air was loaded with suspicion when I came in there. And through God's grace, we turned that place around, and God gave me tremendous favor in repositioning the SABS. How did we do it? First, I had to understand that there are legitimate expectations here. There was the fears of people that's been working there for 40 years, 39 years. But there were also a young emerging black talent that's walking around there with master's degrees and honors degrees and so on. How do you reconcile the legitimate expectations from the Sipos, the Ntabisengs, the Zwelis, and those kind of guys, with Omgavi, and those kind of people that's been there for years? I couldn't discount that. I got them into focus group discussions, and I brought in a pastor by the name of Blackie Swart. Who knows Blackie Swart? Very weird. Now Blackie Swart, I brought him in with Dr. David Malapo and Dr. Ketsu Mabusela, who is a clinical psychologist. And we've started focusing on these paradigms. The age paradigm, the old people felt challenged by these young people that come with new ideas from the varsity and so on. We've been doing this thing like this for 40 years. Don't come and tell me anything about it. There was also a gender paradigm. The engineering, technical space was very much male-dominated. Females had a hard time there. There was also geographical paradigm. Head office versus the other 12 regional offices. But there was also a racial paradigm. And we engaged with these things. Other people walked out. But we had an 87% participation rate. And yes, other people didn't embrace it, but I personally sat in some of those meetings where I see big people crying their lungs out there. I never thought that this is what you were harboring about me. Until then, I never thought, that this is your perception. Things that were said at a Bryfles fire became gospel. Things that were said in a taxi became gospel about us. And once you drill down to the detail, there was no detail. It was all perceptions. Then we ultimately moved into a stage where we got consensus on what the desired SAB should look like. We did a roadmap, and we captured in Roadmap 2010, because I believe if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But we also had to maintain the momentum. And for that, I had to select champions. And these champions were not necessarily from the management echelon. It was from all over the organization. It was an organization, the staff membership of about 1,600 at that time. But I also had to lead with an example. I had to walk in relational integrity. I recall I appointed 2 new executives there, and the one executive, believe you me, after 4.5 months in office, he messed around with my credit card. And I didn't have an option. And he's a born-again believer for that matter. He wants to remind me how much he prays for me at times. But he messed around with my credit card, and I had to be firm because people were watching me How is he going to treat his people? Is he going to treat his people differently from us? And the poor guy had to go. And so the HR executive also had to go, but I had to walk in relational integrity there. I also created mechanisms for authentic feedback. I had a special session every second Monday called Martin's Moments With. And we will sit 20-odd in a circle, muffins, coffee, and just focus on 3 questions. What happened? What's missing? What's next? How do you experience the current change in the environment here? Because you see, you sit here on the 8th floor and you're not always aware of some of the nuances taking place. And I had to do these dipsticks because for those of you who are CEOs, the last time they told you the truth as a CEO was the day that you were appointed. All the stuff gets filtered so beautifully, you know. And when it gets onto your table, it smells like roses. Until one day. And therefore I had to build in systems to go and verify for myself what's happening there. I also had to break glass ceilings. You know, there's a lot of people, because of years of service, they were progressing to management positions, but they were not necessarily management material. These are highly technical experts. They hated to sit in meetings. They want to be next to where the action is. So I had to create a technical stream with new job gradings so that I don't hit their pockets, but also build managerial capacity so the people it can manage can actually manage. And by so doing, I didn't lose the expertise of the technical people. They were validated. You are a senior technical specialist. That was his title. And I want you to write the manuals. I want you to mentor Tabi Singh. I want you to mentor Abdul. And I want to hear what I'm trying to say. And I tapped into that and I've incentivized them. We also celebrated achievements. We made a big fuss out of all our achievements. And what were the results? We got ourselves into the top 10 position of certification bodies in the world. Our profitability increased. There was a reduction in staff turnover. In 2006, I was elected onto the ISO Council. I had to present a case study in Ottawa in Canada, and that afternoon I got elected into the ISO Council, and I served in the ISO Council. I used to fly to Geneva at least 5-6 times a year, sitting there, hardly said a word in 45 minutes time in a meeting, because there were clever grey-haired people there, like Dr. Paolo Scolari, the international chairman of Fiat representing Italy, George Arnold of Lucian Technologies, just soaking up the experience and all those sort of things. And yes, I also carved a niche for myself there because Martin can't keep quiet. Ultimately, I challenged them on the strategy for developing countries. We're introducing new standards in the world. It's becoming new barriers for entry. How do you think Lesotho is going to access the US market through the AGOA process if they don't have quality infrastructure? And by so doing, people started. These development agencies started working with us, and we were able to narrow that capacity gap. Another example is, currently, as you've heard, I'm on the board of Netcare, and one of the board subcommittees that I'm serving in is the Social and Ethics Committee. In 2010, Netcare had only 0.31% of people with disabilities as part of our staff members. And we set an ambitious target of 4% by the year 2020. And we launched a vehicle called SINACO, Leadership Program. And last year, during our last board Social and Ethics Committee meeting, we have now hit a target of 3.6% of a staff complement of 38,000 people that comes from the disabled community. As a matter of fact, our people are poached like that because, you know, everybody wants to improve their scorecard and so on. What are the lessons that I've learned there? For change to occur, we had to provide a framework about how that change should occur. It's not just going to happen. We have to measure how it happens and where it is not occurring. We insisted on strong executive support, practical and honest evaluation of the barriers within the workplace. Some of it might be physical, some of it might be attitudinal, but we had to drill down for these things to happen. What are we talking about? Let's go to church for a change. We've got to mastermind in what the Master had in mind. You see, Matthew 5 verse 13 to 16, the Bible says, we're the salt of the earth, the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. These are three very powerful metaphors that speaks of influence. Which means when me and you have been given specific assignments, we need to influence that environment. And therefore, even on the space in the area of diversity, your company should actually become a city on the hill that cannot be hidden. When people are battling with problems of diversity, they need to say, let's go to the city of the hill and find out how they got it right. A city on the hill, when things are going rough and, instability and all sort of things, yours is a stable environment, an environment where human capital thrive. People need to come to you actually. You need to set the benchmark because you're the salt of the earth, the light of the world, a city on the hill that can. Am I talking to the right audience? And how do we change paradigms? It is only through a culture of engagement. And in my own personal life, I had to learn the following lessons, because if you're not engaged with the culture around you, the organizational culture, you can't leave it to the invisible hand. Oh, no, hopefully, sometime. No, it's a conscious and deliberate effort. And I want to raise a few questions with you this morning. The first question, who are my friends? You see, if you don't build relationships across the racial line, your outlook in life will be severely constrained and impoverished, because there's richness in diversity. Some of my best friends are all over the place. And it's only through that richness of, where I can learn something from them. Let me make a stupid example. I always thought, buying flowers for my wife is a white thing. Things for white people. Until my mentor, Brian Winkler, taught me this is not a white thing, Because I forever, Martin, I'm just held up. I came to buy flowers for Sunny here, and flowers, forever flowers. What is this flower thing? And in the Indian community, I know how people work very, very careful with money there, Guys that had to teach me. And who's my coach? It's a lady by the name of Matilda Foree. I've been walking a journey with her for the last 6 years now. Me and her and Vessel, we're big pals. We know each other. Matilda is the point of reference in all the decisions. Most of the decisions I take. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? Who are your friends? If you don't make a deliberate and conscious effort to build these friendships, and it's going to be awkward, man. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be weird, It's going to be, sometimes you will feel out of balance, Because die mense praat so hard. You're going to feel drunk at some time because you want to be like them and you're also not them. Secondly, what is my understanding of other people's life experiences? It's only through engagement that I will know what makes them mad, what makes them glad, and what makes them sad. But if I don't engage with them, I won't know how they experience life. Who are my role models? We all claim that Madiba is our role model, God bless you. But yes, like there's some sharp role models across the color divide, you know. When I go to Stellenbosch, I make a special effort of going to see a guy like Francois van Niekerk, for example, there. And he will sit for hours with me. I had the privilege of ministering with him on 2 conferences. And you know, there's some beautiful role models. Pastor Clive Gopal in Durban, all over the place. Get role models beyond NP van Wyk and Senior van Rensburg. Guard your heart against stereotyping and generalizations. Yeah, black people are always like that. Do you want to tell me you know 40 million black people by name in this country? Yeah. White people don't want to come. You know, white people, do you really know 4.5 million white people personally? You've met all of them? On what authority? Now, when people raise an opinion, here's the critical test. Listen, what is said? Secondly, who is saying it? And thirdly, on what authority are they saying this? I filter all these things because generalizations are dangerous. Listen what Chimamanda Adichie says. She says, the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. And this is the trap of generalization. Because we heard one story and that becomes gospel to us. Sixthly, be vigilant for unconscious bias. See, bias is a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, a person or a group, and compared with another. And it is usually considered to be unfair. You might know Sari there behind the till, but you don't jump the queue because we're watching you, you see. And some of us will say, you see now, they're discriminating against us. And you think you just ask Sari something quickly, stempel gou vir my die ding is, ons watch you. And what do we read about it? So be conscious. Tell people, excuse me, you know, I just want Sari to stamp this thing for me. Be sensitive to these things. It might not be a big deal, but it will go a long way to break these perceptions. In our place in Netcare, we also created opportunities to engage in open discussions on the realities of racism. It's led personally by the CEO, and we created a platform called Beyond the Numbers. You see, the numbers can look good, but we need to go beyond the numbers. And in these crucial conversations, we can engage about those taken for granted internalized superiority. And sometimes these internalized inferiority created by decades of segregation. And it's only through honest engagement that these things can be taken care of. Lastly, speak the truth in love. You see, it's not always what we say, it's how we say it. And just check the motives of our heart all the time. Because sometimes we can be so correct, so wrongly correct. Saying the right thing the wrong way creates much more complications than could have ever imagined. I want to conclude by stating that South Africa is a great country, man. I mean, after Friday night, I feel there's something happening again. Am I talking to the right crowd here? Or are you still worried and nervous? Things are happening, okay? There's a tremendous amount of goodwill in this country. In 2011, I had the privilege of being die president van die Afrikaanse Handelsinstituut. I used to wear a chain like a mayor when I used to go to meetings. In Potgietersrus and those kind of things. Meneer die president. But you know, we've done excellent work in places like Philippolis, Bella Bella, Uppington, Ben Daisel and them there in Harrismith and so on. There's a tremendous amount of goodwill on both sides of the fence. We should not underrate them. But we, beloved, we are the glue that must keep the society together. If the salt loses its flavor, it will become useless and people will just trample upon it and we will become irrelevant. Our influence will wane. I'm closing with this slide. Very well-known book, Martin Luther King Jr. The book is called Letters from a Birmingham Jail. And he made this following very profound statement: real change comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of men willing be to co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself become an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We've got to mastermind what the Master had in mind. We're co-workers with Christ. Through Christ, through His Holy Spirit, these things can be overcome. How awkward it might be. Are you willing to mastermind what the Master had in mind? I thank you.